Hello, my name is Ben Tice. I work for the Law School Admission Council, the company that develops the LSAT India. Today I want to talk about the Reading Comprehension section of the exam. There will always be one RC section on every exam. In this section there will be approximately 24 total questions, divided into 4 sets of questions about different reading passages. In most cases, you will be presented with a single passage of approximately 450 to 500 words and a series of questions about that passage. But occasionally, in what we call comparative reading, or CR, you will read a pair of passages, which will be labeled Passage A and Passage B, and answer a series of questions about both passages. These passages will always be related to each other in some way, and they'll be shorter, so that the total word count will still be about 450 to 500 words. The passages in the RC section will cover a variety of topics, but let me stress, no specialized background knowledge is required to understand any reading comprehension passage. To give you a feel for what these passages can look like, let's consider a sample RC passage. This passage and 5 questions associated with it are described in detail on the website. For now, just focus on the passage itself. This should give you an idea of what 450 to 500 words ends up looking like on the page. What kinds of questions do we ask in reading comprehension? While I can't give you a complete list, I can highlight a few different types of RC questions. For now, let's consider questions that we might ask in the case where there is a single RC passage. First, which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? Regardless of topic, every RC passage will have a main point that the author is attempting to establish, or the author will have some purpose in writing the passage. And since every RC passage has some kind of main point or purpose, we will often directly ask about that in the questions. Second, which one of the following can be inferred from the passage? Notice that such a question requires you to go beyond the passage itself and use reasoning to identify some further statement that can be inferred from what the author says. Another way we like to go beyond the passage is to ask a question like, the author of the passage is most likely to agree with which one of the following statements. In such a case, the correct answer could well be something the author did not explicitly state, but which follows from what the author has said. Finally, which one of the following principles is operative in the author's argument? This is another example that requires reasoning beyond what the author says. Let's turn our attention to comparative reading, the case where we have a pair of passages, Passage A and Passage B. What kinds of questions do we ask in CR? Many questions in CR concern both passages. For example, instead of asking about the main point of a single passage, we will ask something like, which one of the following is a topic that is central to both passages? Second, instead of asking about what a single author is likely to believe, we may ask questions about what both authors believe. So we may ask something like, the authors would be most likely to agree about which one of the following. Finally, which one of the following most accurately characterizes the relationship between the two passages? Remember, the two passages will always be related in some way, and sometimes we will directly ask about that relationship. Let's talk briefly about some tips for approaching the reading comprehension section of the test. First, read each passage carefully. This is important advice. The questions we ask all require some degree of understanding of the passage. If you have only skimmed the passage or read it inattentively, you will be unable to answer these questions. Second, try to identify the main point and the author's point of view. As we've discussed, every passage will have some main point. The author will always have some point of view. Often we will directly ask about this, but even when we don't, a firm understanding of the author's main point is central to most of the questions we ask. Third, keep contrasting points of view straight. This is obviously important in the case of comparative reading, where there are 2 different passages that you need to keep straight. But even in the single passage case, an author may advance his or her argument by briefly describing what his or her opponent believes, and then arguing against that position. Fourth, try to see the implications of the passage. As we've discussed, many RC questions require you to go beyond the page and use reasoning to determine the correct answer. Since you know you are going to be asked such questions, you should read the passages with that in mind. This has been intended as a brief overview of the Reading Comprehension section of the LSAT India. For detailed further information, please consult the official LSAT India Handbook. Thank you, and we wish you great success on the test.